Creating infographics, making information visually accessible. This short video will include the following topics: an introduction to infographics, design principles, researching the infographic, organizing the infographic, and designing the infographic. You've probably seen infographics in many places. They are a common way for technical writers to present data in a visual way. Lots of data, such as statistics, times, costs, lists, and names, can sometimes be too much for a reader to effectively comprehend when written within a text. Infographics are a way of pulling out important data and telling a visual story with data for a reader that will help them comprehend its meaning quickly and effectively. Infographics typically take complicated information that is usually numeric, but sometimes textual, and show it visually in a relatively small space. Effective infographics typically have a simple design and give emphasis and meaning to data. They effectively take numbers involved in a project and tell a story with them. When you begin looking at infographics and begin creating your own infographic, keep in mind the design principles that your book and the project handout discuss. You will want to consider alignment and proximity, or how you will show items within the space so that like ideas are put close to one another. Notice the way this infographic places information about bus riders and train riders next to one another, both vertically and horizontally, so that they can be compared. Repetition is another concept to consider when creating your infographic. Using the same shapes, symbols, or icons can help the reader recognize related ideas. The speech bubbles in this infographic, for example, show the reader where they can find different but related facts about students and social media. Fonts are also important to consider. Sans serif fonts are fonts that do not have the little points on the ends of the letters, such as Arial and Helvetica. Because the letters take up less visual space, they are good fonts for typing in close or small spaces. Serif fonts, such as Times New Roman and Courier, are better for titles or places where you have more space to write. Notice that this infographic uses consistent sans serif fonts throughout. Symbols can also effectively be used to convey ideas. Notice that this infographic uses the image of the Canadian dollar in various sizes to indicate its decreased value. Color is another element of design that can also be helpful to your reader. Notice in this infographic, many colors are used to represent different steps in the process. The colors are muted though, so that the text inside the arrows can be easily read. Be careful when using colors and text to ensure that there is enough contrast between the text and the background for the reader to be able to see the text clearly. This is especially important for readers with visual issues. Less contrast between text and background makes the text harder for them to read. Finally, consider your text spacing and grouping. Your text covers many of these concepts, such as rules, which are lines that divide text. Notice that the infographic here uses very light lines to divide the columns of statistics it presents. Also notice that even though the text is found in different areas throughout the handout, it is consistently left aligned. When conducting research for your infographic, remember that you are to educate the public about your issue. Find data that tells a story. Also be sure to keep record of where you find your data so that you can cite the source at the bottom of the handout. To give you a complete example of how this process works, I found this rather startling statistic about obesity in Texas. Before you begin designing your infographic, think about how you want to organize the information. Again, focus on the story you want the reader to understand from the data you present. If you are making a large infographic with lots of different information, focus on separating information into groups or chunks on the page. That is, make sure related pieces of information are placed together on the page and there is some distance between other groups of information. My example is small and relatively easy to separate. I have the price of obesity in 2009 and the projected price of obesity in 2030. The story I want to tell here is how the social cost of obesity is going to go up significantly if nothing is done about the problem. That is what I will emphasize in my design, how much the cost will rise. When you begin to actually design the infographic, you have several great places to start for hunting for ideas. First, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Do a Google search for infographics related to your topic. Consider the way they tell the story behind the information visually. You can take ideas from other infographics, but you must not copy them directly. You have to make your own by hand. Also consider using online infographic makers. They supply templates you can use to begin creating your own infographic. Most will require you to create a free account. Also take a look at some of the templates available from Microsoft Word. SmartArt is a Microsoft Word tool that provides shapes to help convey ideas. It allows you to simply supply text in the shapes. You can also create a very simple infographic using basic Microsoft Word tools. I demonstrate how simple an infographic can be in this example. I simply use text boxes with dollar signs in different colors to show how the price of obesity will soar. Notice my dramatic language. I used red and yellow to help indicate the urgency of the situation, especially with the red dollar signs that show the increase in cost. Your infographic can be this simple. It does not have to be as fancy as some of the examples presented here. It does, however, need to be more than a single graph or chart. Use the design principles discussed to make your infographic clear and useful to your reader.